Okay, today my guest is Professor Ursula Ott. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with her. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Ursula as a person, Professor Ott as a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I'll skip many of her accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Ott was the Erwin Schrödinger Fellow at LSE. She serves on the board of the AIB Research Methods Shared Interest Group and is a vice president for webinars and PhD programs. She is responsible for organizing webinars on social science and COVID, multi-level methods, and writing a convincing methodology section. She has won international prizes and best paper awards for the analysis of international negotiations with a game theoretical and configurational approach. At the 2019 AIB conference, she won the Best Research Methods Paper Award. She also won the Best Paper Award at the annual conference of Global Innovation and Knowledge Academy in 2015, the Best Paper Award at the Reading UNCTAD International Business Conference in 2013, and she was an expert witness in the House of Lords regarding the Brexit negotiations. Thank you, Ursula, for joining us.
Thank you.
First question, what did you want to become when you were a child?
When I was a child, I think I was living in a bubble more than that I had clear vision on what I want to do. When I was a child, I really liked Pippi Longstocking because she was very courageous, she was unconventional, she supported the weak. And that was something I just liked as a child. and in that sense, I didn't really have a fixed view. I was surrounded by strong women. And so that was nicely embedded, but I never wanted to say I wanted to be a doctor or I wanted to be this and that. It just came, I think, in the flow of events, just by choices I took in my life. I eventually ended up where I am now. But I think it's quite nice to look back and think whether that person who wanted to be one day someone unconventional and courageous is still that person. And I think deep down, I still like that I wanted that in my childhood to be Pippi Longstocking. And in that way, it's more, it's more about values and ideas. And
super interesting. Can you pinpoint the earliest moment of awareness between foreign versus domestic?
That's an interesting thing because I grew up in the center, in the heart of Europe in Austria, and we were surrounded by borders. And with that, you have different languages, you have different currencies, we had different currencies. And when I grew up, we had Swiss francs, we had German marks, but also we always wanted to be millionaires, and then you looked at Italian lira, and that was you were very quickly a millionaire there. So in that sense, it was very early on that we realized borders, but I think it was also that we had many cultures, many languages, and I think this was a really great advantage. And sometimes the borders were just flowing and not anymore as stiff as you expected them. In other contexts, in other countries.
So, Ursula, how did you choose academia?
This was very early, actually, when I started to study, that I enjoyed that process of thinking and reading and analyzing. So when I started at the University of Vienna, I wanted first to go into mathematics because I loved that. And then I just realized, and people came to and said, don't you think that will be very boring? And I just thought, yeah, maybe I find something that have math and stats and all that, but have a bit of exactly the cultural side, languages. So I chose economics with an international focus. And through that, being at the university, listening to people, coming into contact with fascinating people at the University of Vienna also, that made me realize actually that's what I want to do. I tried also to think maybe I go into management consulting or something like that, but realized that actually the freedom which I have as an academic, I wouldn't have there. I could explore new ideas, new thought process, go into interdisciplinary ways of thinking, and that was something I was hoping to do for my life. And actually, that's what I do.
Where did you do your PhD?
I did my PhD at the University of Vienna. And that is it's a place where you have loads of Nobel Prize winners. And when you go into the courtyard, you see all the busts of statues of the Nobel Prize winners and big people, which is an interesting thing when you do your PhD, because it really puts you into place. And you feel there are much more important people around, and you have to think and understand what they were doing. So I think it was a very good way of learning to be modest. And I think that's something I really like when coming into contact with people who have something to say, or who had something to say as a young PhD student, that I thought I just listen and find out what they have to say. And yeah, fortunately, I was in a good position there to listen to fascinating people.
Perfect. Something that is not on your CV that people might find interesting.
I like to play the violin, and I learned one saxophone, but then I realized deep down on my wish list is learning the violin. So I learned the violin really late, actually, and because that hindered me to be a virtuoso. And for that reason, I'm playing folk music in little workshops. And now with lockdown, I was fortunate to do it online with a group of 8 violin players, and it was fun.
Do you practice every day?
Yeah, I do. And it's fascinating to be able to see the notes, to hear the music and coordinate that. And and I would love to play grand symphonies, but I think that I'm too old for that now.
There's actually something, Heifetz actually, there was a master class, and everything he's saying when he's teaching his masterclass applies to our field, our training. I was really fascinated to hear that. If you stopped what you're doing today, what's the second best alternative career path for you?
I think I would like to continue writing, but more probably theater plays or screenplays, which would be something where I could explore stories and lives. And that's what I'm always interested in people and stories and lives. And so I think that would be fascinating to do that.
It will be. Regrets, have you got any regrets?
No, actually, maybe not to be a virtuoso musician. Maybe that is something that is probably something I would have always liked. I love to be in between classical music and I like classical in Vienna. Of course, you're surrounded by classical music and theater. So I just immerse in that, and maybe I regret being not able to be part of an orchestra. I think that's deep down probably something.
That's holding you back. It's not too late. You can always do that.
Yeah, but I think I mean, I can do it for fun, but not as a musician. Yeah, sure. I mean, knowing how difficult a musician's life is, I think I probably have a better one now, because being in auditions is not fun.
That's true. But review process reminds me of the same thing. But what are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of being able to reach people from all different cultures, and being able to see people in their own context and value them the way they are, and going beyond boundaries. And now with the webinars, I'm really glad that we can reach people with thoughts, with possibilities. And yes, in my research center, I'm very proud that I have people from all cultures, from all backgrounds, and working together on a regular basis. During lockdown, we had weekly meetings just to keep everyone going, that people are not lost and lonely. And that opened up so many possibilities. And I think that is something I always wanted to do, and I'm proud that I can work with people and help their careers also.
After COVID, after things open up, are you looking forward to it, or do you prefer the remote Zoom world?
I mean, it's an interesting one. I do prefer being with people, of course, just having a clear interaction, but we would have not it as easy as we can reach now people, for instance, that we can talk to people in Australia, in New Zealand, and at the same time also, and avoiding travel, and with all the climate change situations, probably it's a carbon footprint better way. But I think it's nice to be at conferences, and I think that is something we miss deep down, not to be able just to have a coffee with someone and talking and being just in a relaxed atmosphere also, and also in the seminars directly and listening to sessions. That's different.
True. Let's switch to research. Say you're stranded in a small village, in a pub. Locals don't know about you. They're curious what you do. How do you explain your research, and how do you explain the importance of your research to people who don't read your work?
So I would try to first find out what the people's professions are. And in that small pub, you will probably have different professions. And then I would try to explain to them that I'm observing how people negotiate, how people make decisions, how people deal with conflict, and also cooperation. And then would probably try to give examples of how countries, whether they live within a country and with other countries, how the negotiations would work. And I would try to make it as easy as possible for them to understand. I mean, that's probably one of the things. I mean, I had, in a funny way, I had to do something similar when I was on the way to a conference, and I was asked what I'm doing by a taxi driver. And I said, I'm in international business. And then he said to me, so you can explain Brexit to me? And I said, yeah, I could try that. And I started to explain what I'm doing. And then he got out of the car, and I thought, oh my God, now I don't know what he's going to do. And then he came and he shook the hand and he said, this was so well explained. If I had known that, I would have never voted for Brexit. And so this was one of the situations where I just thought, we should try to explain that, what we're doing, to people who are so far removed from what we're doing. And I think I enjoyed actually the way to explain it in a way that it has an impact on people's lives. So that is something I think that would be important for my research.
Interesting. What are some of the omitted contexts or concepts, variables in IB research that we should be maybe covering more of?
I think if we go into other disciplines, there we would find lots of variables which we haven't discovered in IB. And I mean, I give an example, for instance, with agency theory. I mean, I've done a lot of agency theory. And when I was at the LSE, I was really pleased to be around all those great thinkers in that way, and going back into the roots of agency theory, where you have actually game theoretical problems of information asymmetries. And what I find up sometimes when I read papers in IB, when you have the whole thing, what they have done at the end, they write down, we have just solved the agency problem. And then I go back and I just think, no, actually, there is something missing. Actually, you forgot the information asymmetry. It's not a motivation problem, and actually there is a tension between it, and it is an interactive decision problem. And if you can't bring that out, then it's difficult. And I think there is much more what we can do in IB in terms of information, using that. Yeah, I mean, fascinating more in terms of risk analysis also. I think that is often not so prominent, because yeah, we are dealing with uncertainty and risk, and that's a big issue at the moment also in IB.
About creativity, in your opinion, how should new young scholars approach scholarship so that they can come up with these interesting papers, interesting ideas? What's the source of creativity from your perspective?
I think what I find creative is often that you look outside the trodden path, that you dare to go into other disciplines and start new again, because that's what I found fascinating when I was Schrödinger's fellow at the LSE. I was able to go into the maths department, into the economics department. I was into the anthropology, and I was listening to what the scholars there said, what they had to say, and through that I realized, oh, there is something which we haven't explored. For instance, culture in a different way. Bringing it together. And I know the economists never think about culture as an important thing, but I thought culture is an important thing. So using it together with game theory was fascinating to explore. And I think that is something, but it is also that you need to be courageous, because no one likes starting from scratch again in another discipline, or being just like a toddler learning a language again. And that is something which I find we need to do, because we bring in knowledge into IB, but then we are also able to export knowledge, because that's an important one for us as a field, but also to link to big disciplines back and forth. So, and there was creativity also to understand and to explain that.
That was a very good answer. If I may follow up on culture in terms of game theory, how would it look like? What would it look like?
That's culture is in game theory, because game theory is a part of decision analysis. So when you have decision, you make an individual decision. In game theory, you have an interactive decision. So I know that you know that I know is in game theory that you basically try to understand what your partner is doing. When you have perfect information, that's like you play chess, you know what the other one is doing. But when you play poker, then you do not know the strategies. And the assumption of culture in game theoretical behavior is that you assume that culture is not something stable, that you do not have rational behavior in culture, because you have emotional situations, and that different cultures behave in a different way according to their upbringing, to their learning. And I find it fascinating not to take everything on face value, that I just say, because you are coming from that culture, you have to behave in that way. We are so surprised. And I found with experiments, I found it absolutely fascinating and surprising that you have an assumption about something or someone, how someone behave, and then you get the surprises. And that is something which I think where we can come in with culture, because culture is dynamic, it changes, and we change with culture, with adaptation, with migration, with learning, being student in one context, being an academic in another context, or this kind of thing. And I think in decision making, we need to adapt to different cultures. We can't just take it at face value that everyone is rational.
Interesting. If a PhD student comes to you and says, I'm looking for interesting, great ideas to build my career on for the next 5 to 10 years, what's the advice you give to them for a research topic that you think is going to be spectacular in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, we are living in spectacular times. Let's face that. We are living in times where we are IB scholars. As an IB scholar, you want to go across boundaries. We have our systems, we have our production systems, we have our international transport systems working like organisms. And at the same time, with COVID, we were reduced to being in our own boundaries, and we need new things to think about. We need new ways of adapting to a changing world in terms of employment. We have different migrants, and in the same way. Are they still going to be migrants or not? Of course, I mean, we have 100,000 years of migration and totally forgotten about that. And therefore, we will migrate, or we have migration going on different levels. And I think these are really important questions for the next 5 to 10 years, so even more, on how we work, how we adapt to changes, and how we are as human beings living with other human beings in a sustainable and morally positive, constructive way. I think these are really important questions, and if we crack these, we live on a planet which has something to offer, but we have constraints, and we need to think about these.
Ursula, what can you say about the culture of scholarship in IB and how it evolved over time, and where we're headed to? Especially, this is important for you to comment on because you're coming from a different école, and difference between the American way of thinking to scholarship, and especially in IB, versus the European and Central European. What can you say about the evolution that we're going through?
I mean, I think the evolution of IB follows the political circumstances, follows the economic circumstances. And interestingly, when you look back into an evolutionary process of IB, those scholars in the early days responded to the challenges of these days. We went on and had new things coming up. We had globalization coming up. We had interesting ways of dealing with challenges, and we always responded to that. So in that sense, IB was more a response scholarly to what has been there. Often theories were there and were taken on and adapted to the situation. And I found that very fascinating to start with. Then I saw the changes and the adaptation to the multinational enterprises and China, and all these differences came into play. And it is much more now a transnational way of being. But I think in the next few years, we will see another load of changes coming our way, new terms evolving, new theories evolving. And I think that is something to see it in a more interdisciplinary way, in a more adapted way to the challenges. And I think that was IB before, and it always will be a field which deals with adapting to our environment, international business environment.
Very well put. Thank you. About advice and mentoring section, for the sake of time, I'm going to go to this one. Who was your advisor when you were going through the program?
And I would advise.
No, who was your advisor? Who advised you?
I said I'm advising. My advisor. I mean, I didn't have a real advisor. I had a supervisor from my PhD, and who was, funny enough, dean at the Frankfurter Schule when Adorno and Habermas and Luhmann and these very influential people were there. But he then moved away, and I think what he wanted me to do is to think broad and think beyond the boundaries. And I think all the way along, I had lots of people, and I was glad to see various different people giving good advice. So for instance, I had economists giving advice on how to work in common agency across, but then also in IB, and I have to say, Mark Kesson gave me a very good advice in 20 years ago when he said, try to have, and that is now advice for PhD students I give also, try to fit in every day at least half an hour of research, whatever you do, whether you do admin, whether you teach. And I think this is something I take on very, very seriously, and I give it also to my PhD students, to my colleagues. Try to keep it going, because that is something which keeps your passion going, and you're not getting out of it, because you do something with your brain, you do something in thinking, and bring something further. So
that's such a very good advice. And Nikolai Voss also talks about pretty much the same thing. He says, like, I write every day. I write at least 600, 800 words every day. That's actually quite effective to keep the engine running, even if the mind isn't 100% focused. About Ursula, about the common mistakes that you see junior faculty or PhD students usually run into, what are some of the mistakes that you see that they are doing that you would say don't do it?
Yeah, I mean, with PhD students, I would say to narrow down far too quickly into something very, very narrow. So when I had my PhD viva, I had 3 vivas, because we at the Vienna University of Vienna, you had in economics, in sociology, and in management, and you had to defend your thesis into each of these disciplines that you have to say what you contribute. And I think sometimes it is too small what people are doing, too small what the focus is, and not seeing actually the bigger picture. Where does it fit? And also, is it something which you want to continue afterwards? So do you finish it off, or have you lost the passion for your research? And therefore start with something you really like. That's what I would say to everyone, because for a PhD, there will be ups and downs, and every PhD has that. And the one thing which keeps you going is the passion for your subject. And I've seen that now when I was director of the PhD program. I had often discussions with students who dropped in their enthusiasm, and then I asked, why did you start it? What did you like? Where was the passion? And then talking for an hour or so, they come back and say, that's why I started it. And therefore choose something where you have a passion for, what you like doing, and something which might be really outrageous, and no one would think that this is an interesting topic. In 50 years, that might be something on book, and we don't know. And so that's with impact. We don't know what in 50 years will come out and will have an impact. We don't at this point in time.
About the skills or the tool set that people need to develop, harbor, which skill sets are the most difficult to build or acquire?
I mean, it depends on your background, on your talents, and so on. Some people would say it's very difficult to do math. Math is a language. If you don't see it that way and it's hard work, that would be a hard skill to do. But if you like it, you don't find it hard. You might then find it hard to write. So that's something. Sometimes these big things, it's either doing technical things, they can be hard and difficult to learn. On the other hand, it could also be very hard to write, and writing is also a skill and has to be learned. And people like myself is a second language, where English is a second language. This is something you have to practice. You have to read a lot of papers, a lot of things, and into understanding that the writing skill is also a very important one.
And a good copy editor. Well, Ursula, this was very good. What's the question that I should have asked you but haven't? How we as IB scholars
would want to integrate the different disciplines more, that people can understand each other much better. I mean, I find it often very sad that mathematical things need to go into the appendix when you write something for IB. And is there something, I mean, we're working now with the webinars to bring people the skill sets out there, but I think how can we as scholars help to integrate and understand each other much more than we do at the moment? Because I think there are lots of gaps and they need to be filled to have a smoother way, a stronger, robust way for IB to stand the ground in comparison to other disciplines. I think that is something where we need to ask ourselves what we can do.
So very shortly, in the research methods interest group, for instance, or the webinars that you're organizing, what are some of the ideas to help build a trajectory towards this integration? What are you guys doing to formulate?
Yeah, we are working very hard with all those experts in the quants part, in working towards ethical, responsible research methods, data collection in a responsible way. So we have these fascinating ways that we can bring in together and bring it outside, from the theoretical, from the research method side, from the research design. What kind of questions do we ask? I think that is a very important part. Research questions. What research questions do we ask? And what kind of methods do we then need to use? And going away from this silo thinking that here is the qual person and this qual person can only do qual for the rest of their lives, or the quants person only quants for the rest of their life. I think we need to think integrated in a way that we can have the question, and then with the question, we have the tools. And that is something what I would also suggest for the skills. We need to bring out skills which are not one-dimensional. We need to bring it together, because the questions which we need to ask for answers on a bigger scale than just a very myopic way of dealing with it. And I think that has changed also, and we need to do that in IB much, much more.
Exactly. Ursula, thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Likewise, I enjoyed it very much.